Good morning. My name is Donnie Miller. I'm a sweet potato weed scientist with the LSU Ag Center. I want to talk to you a little bit this morning about sweet potato weed control in general. Now, sweet potato is a lot different than a lot of other crops, a lot of the agronomic crops that we grow in the northeast part of the state and throughout Louisiana, in that when we talk about weed management, there aren't a whole lot of options available. In these other crops, we have a number of standalone products we can use, and when you start talking about mixing those products that we have available, you have a number of options. In addition, these other crops, you have transgenic technology, which allows application of things like Roundup, Liberty, and now 2,4-D and dicamba. We don't have that luxury in sweet potato. As a matter of fact, we currently have no herbicide that is registered for over-the-top broadleaf weed control in sweet potato. So it's imperative that we get excellent weed control at planting or before planting going into the back end of the season, because we have nothing to clean it up with. Now, we do have grass herbicides, which will take out most of the grasses we have, but as I mentioned, for broadleaves, we currently don't have anything available. Right now, it'd be fantastic if we had an option to come in, let's say 21 to 35 days after planting, to take care of any escapes that from our pre-emergence materials at planting or anything that came up after those applications. That would be fantastic. At one time, we did have a material, Sandia, which was pretty good on most broadleaves and also gave us fantastic nutsedge control, which is a major weed we have in sweet potato, but we no longer have that option. So like I said, it's very important that we start off very clean. Before we apply, we plant the sweet potato, we transplant the slips into the ground. Before we do that, we have a couple of materials that we can use. Valor is a material we've had on the market for several years. Flumioxazin does a good job on most of the broadleaves that we have a problem with in sweet potato. Last year, we obtained registration through some of the work that we conducted here and that conducted in other states, and we were able to get Reflex or Fomesafen labeled for that pre-transplant application as well. Has pretty much a similar spectrum of weeds controlled, primarily broadleaves, just like the Valor. It does bring some nutsedge activity. Yellow nutsedge, as I mentioned, is a major weed that we have to deal with year by year. So the Reflex does bring some activity to control that particular weed. Now, once we come through and we do our transplanting of the sweet potatoes, now the problem with that is that we do have some soil disturbance. So when you come in and you apply your Valor, you apply your Reflex, you're applying that as a band. You have a complete treated area from row top to row top. When you come in and transplant, that transplanter will disturb the soil slightly, and you get kind of a breakup of that treated area. So we generally follow that up with an application of either dual magnum or more commonly command. Both of these materials do a good job of controlling most of the annual grasses we have a problem with. Things like broadleaf signal grass, crabgrass, goosegrass, brown top millet. We see those year to year. Those are common in sweet potato in Louisiana and in other states as well. They do a very good job of controlling these and also provide you some small-seeded broadleaf control, things like carpet weed and things like this that we have problems with. But they do a good job with the small-seeded broadleaves. In addition, the dual magnum can also provide us some control of yellow nutsedge as well. So you have a 1-2 combination where you have nutsedge that's a problem. You could come in with Reflex Pre before you plant the sweet potatoes, then afterwards follow that up over the top with dual magnum, which does a good job on the yellow nutsedge as well. It's kind of a 1-2 punch. So those are the two materials we have available. The command is very water soluble, so it doesn't take much rainfall to activate it. Dual magnum is probably medium on the water solubility scale. Again, not that much, a ½ inch of activating rainfall to get it activated. So we try to do a good job with apply before we plant and at planting to get us on through the season, because like I said, we don't have anything to come back and rescue us. About 20 days after application, in addition to tillage, which we can perform, we can also come back over the top with the dual magnum, which provides us, as I mentioned, good grass control, good nutsedge control, and good small-seeded broadleaf control. So that's pretty much our control options, our control programs that we have in sweet potato. Right now, like I said, we're lacking with an over-the-top component. We can come in and clean things up. That would really put the icing on the cake and provide us with a much better overall control scheme to get us from the beginning of season to the end of the season. Now, once the season is over, we also have the option of controlling some of the perennial weeds we have problems with. Any fields that may have Johnson grass, any in them, any fields that have alligator weed in them. Probably the best time to control these weeds is once the crop is out in the fall. Once we go ahead and harvest before our first frost that we get, sometimes mid-September to mid-October, if possible, we can come in and make applications of glyphosate herbicide or Roundup herbicide. Most people commonly know it by. There are many formulations of glyphosate. You can make applications in the fall of the year, and it provides you with more long-term control. You're knocking it back at that time of the year. The plants are growing from providing food upwards for the growth of the plant. They're going into survival mode, and the food is going down into the below ground storage organs. So at that time they're taking up the glyphosate, moving it down there, and you get a better long-term kill. That's going to generally take a couple of applications over multiple falls to accomplish that. But that's kind of the overall, just a general scheme of what we see, what we try to accomplish when it comes to sweet potato weed control. As far as new compounds in sweet potato, there's currently one compound that we're looking at, a numbered compound we're looking at, that hopefully may give us an additional mode of action. You know, we always worried about weed resistance. With such a limited amount of materials that we have, we keep relying year after year on these materials, and eventually Mother Nature catches up and you start seeing some resistance issues, as we're seeing with some other herbicides in other crops right now. Doesn't take long for those resistance issues to build up. So we're trying to incorporate additional modes of actions, or the way that a herbicide controls the plant, kills a weed, trying to incorporate more of those into. So we're currently looking at one experimental compound that looks pretty good. Again, it's not an over-the-top material. We can't come in for any escape weeds once the crop is up and just broadcast application over the top of the crop. We'll injure the crop too much with this particular material. We try to focus our research on helping the producer, things we can do to let them make, you know, one more number one in a fresh market, or increase their tonnage in a processing sector. We also try to look at any negative impacts some things may have on the crop to kind of alert the producer. Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, in the other crops, we have transgenic technology, which allows us to make applications of things like Roundup, things like Liberty herbicide, things like 2,4-D and dicamba. Well, obviously, if you're growing sweet potato very, very close to these fields, in close proximity, the chances are that sometimes you can get some off-target movement of these compounds on a sweet potato. And it's imperative that we identify these pitfalls, identify exactly what kind of problems we can run into in that situation, how much yield will the producer lose at that particular point once that off-target application has occurred. We focused a lot of our research on finding out those impacts. We've had studies that we've been able to obtain grant funds to exactly see what those deleterious effects will be. Sweet potato, we can tell you from some of that research, is a lot more resilient than we thought it would be. It's some higher rates than we imagined would be necessary to reduce yield with these off-target applications. So we're kind of looking at some of that as well. So that kind of wraps up with my discussion on sweet potatoes. Like I said, I want to give you just a general overview of, you know, how we control weeds in sweet potatoes, our options that are available, and just a couple of areas of research focus that we've had our program go toward.